Thank you, Ship, for hosting this. Thank you, the Hong Kong Book Fair and the French Consulate for this opportunity. So, yes, I am a reporter with Le Monde, French daily newspaper, and with the French National Radio. I've been in this region for the last 25 years, reporting on all kinds of events, since the nuclear testing in Mururoa until the recent yellow umbrella movement right here in Hong Kong, and in very diverse places as well, from Antarctica to Burma. So a long time in the region. And now recently I started basically 2 years ago when it happened, I started researching MH370 because Le Monde sent me there. That's how I really started. And I just published a book in French called Le vol MH370 n'a pas disparu. I will comment on the title a little bit later. And I am currently updating it, and I'm planning to release an English and a Chinese version in September. So I guess, as you said, Ship, the reason you're here tonight is, and thank you for being here tonight, by the way, is that you want me to tell you where the plane is. It's fair enough, but I want tonight, not because I don't know, and not because I want you to buy my book when it's released, but because actually I'm trying to do the opposite than what the official version is doing. The official version has been to give us a ready-made, off-the-shelf narrative with no explanations, no clues, no proof. What I've tried to do in my work is the opposite, basically looking at what we have as information or clues or facts that are established, and then ask the reader, ask the opinion to use their intelligence to make sense of what we actually know. Yeah, I don't want to do the same thing and say, this is what happened, and this is the way I'm putting the jigsaw together. So now I comment on the title of the book. It says, it translates in English as Flight MH370 did not simply disappear. And it's not a provocative title, as some people have said, because they say, why do you say that? We all know this plane has disappeared. No, I'm saying this is a serious title. The plane, Flight MH370, did not simply disappear, because in this day and age, planes do not disappear. So that's what we have to keep in mind. I mean, a plane, let alone a B777, which is deemed to be the safest plane at the moment available, roughly the size, for you to realize, of 2 blue whales put together. So basically twice, I would say twice this room, metallic, full of electronic, with 5 different layers of communication systems, etc., full of handphones as well, because 239 passengers, including many Chinese ones, would make at least 500 handphones, etc., etc., do not disappear, let alone in this part of the world whether we're talking about the South China Sea or the Malacca Straits, because these are the two places where the plane disappeared, then it may have gone to Southern Indian Ocean. But these places are monitored 24/7 by the two biggest nations of this planet, the US and China, both by sea, by sky, by space, etc. So when I'm saying to start, flight MH370 did not disappear, it is a serious title, actually. And I'm calling on people, intelligence, to react, because my first impression is that being given such a narrative is an insult to human intelligence. So that's my kind of my basic point. Yeah, just to add a little point on this, as you all know, making stealth or making planes go stealthy, basically invisible, is something that people have been trying to do for decades, right? At least 60 years, I guess, we're trying to make stealthy planes. And yet now, extraordinary, a B777 becomes stealthy. So it must have some very fantastic gear that no one has ever discovered until then. Anyway, so my point is that does not make sense. We must stop saying that the story is incredible. We must say it is not credible. And we need a plausible story for the loss of this aircraft and the loss, not to forget, it's more important, of the 239 people who were on board. That's my starting point. Asking the world to believe that MH370 disappeared is an insult to all of us, and it is an insult to human intelligence. So maybe I will tell you as well how I came involved in the story, because you may wonder, I'm no aviation expert. As I told you, I cover all kinds of things, including contemporary art and things like that. I'm no pilot. Worst, even I'm a woman, which in this world, you know, pilots are still one of these jobs that are overwhelmingly occupied by men. But it is very simple. Initially, I just covered the story because my newspaper, Le Monde, sent me there. So that was March 2014. And of course, I saw that the story was not very satisfying, but we were very busy just covering what was coming up. And I will go back to these first days a bit later. But once Australia took over, I thought, okay, they are so optimistic and so assertive that they will find a plane, that surely they will find a plane, and the file will be closed one way or the other. Actually, when I left Kuala Lumpur, they had just found big debris, and the general impression was that the case was closed already. But it wasn't. And I saw months, and I kept a distant eye on that story, and I was still wondering, when will we really know? And I came across some information step by step, and when the first anniversary, so 1 year later, March 2015, came up, my newspaper, Le Monde, agreed that we should do an assessment of where do we stand. What do we know now, a year later? There was it's called the factual information. It is the interim document that was published at that moment. And we did a double page before that, just listing all the inconsistencies of the story. And many people were very impressed, because most of us, we remember, we know that this was a story that we never liked because it didn't sound right, it didn't feel right, but you have to let it go, and then there is a new story coming over and you forget. But after that, I became convinced that we needed to dig a bit further. The newspaper also sent me to the Maldives to check. I don't know if you remember, there was this, some people in a small village at the bottom of the archipelago who said that they had seen a plane flying low. And some people thought it was MH370. Of course, I was thinking if it is MH370 that they saw there in the morning of the 8th of March, then there is no reason we're searching in Australia. So we should clarify this. And I clarified that. I think I proved that it was not MH370 for obvious reasons, but I can answer, we can discuss this more precisely after. And then I move on to the book, because it seemed to me that the story was so complicated and so deep that a series of articles wouldn't give it justice. So now maybe I'll just quickly refresh. Actually, I should keep an eye on the time, because normally my piece is on the radio is 40 seconds, and now I'm told I have 40 minutes. So I'm a bit confused about time, but I could speak for hours anyway. So I should just make sure I don't speak for too long. So quickly, I will refresh your memory as to what happened, but you may, and also Ship said it briefly. 8th of March, normal flight. It's a daily flight. The 370 goes up, the 371 comes back. It's every day of the week. Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, all fine, going up for 40 minutes. And then basically after 40 minutes, at 1:19, no more news. The goodbye at 1:19. Not the goodbye, just the saying that they change from the airspace of Malaysia to the airspace of Vietnam, and that is the last we've heard of that plane. Then the next day you would have seen the passengers waiting in Beijing, and then the search starts in the South China Sea for 1 or 2 days. Actually, what's happening there is interesting, and it's something that I'm coming back to at the end of my investigation, because during the first 24 hours and even 48 hours, it was clear, it seemed clear for many people that the plane had crashed there in the South China Sea. It was announced officially by the Vietnamese authorities. They even said, well, tonight we have 3 ships staying where the plane is. There was a massive oil slick that was identified, but then dismissed very quickly. So a lot of things have happened in the South China Sea during the first few hours, but it's been very quickly forgotten and pushed aside within less than 48 hours, I would say. And we saw pretty distracting stories coming up. You may remember the story of the 2 Iranians who had the stolen passport, Austrian one and an Italian one, and there was a lot of confusion about that. And then there was the story that the co-pilot had hosted 2 young South African young girls in his cabin. So the media had a lot of distracting and confusing things to cover, and it was difficult to keep track, actually, of the real story in a way. So that was during the first week. Then something around the middle of that week, we start hearing that maybe the plane continued flying, and that became really even more enigmatic in a way. But the authorities were always denying. The Hishamuddin Hussein, the Transport and Defense Minister of Malaysia, was always saying, no, that's not true, that's not true. Finally, Saturday, so 1 week exactly after, Prime Minister Najib Razak of Malaysia confirms that, he confirms 3 things actually during this press conference. Number 1, he speaks of deliberate actions. Deliberate action referring to turning off the transponder and the ACAR system and turning back the plane towards the west. That's very important, and I'll come back to it because it's one of the key, I think, finding of my work in a way. So he confirms that. I mean, he announced that, and then he confirms what was so far denied, the fact that the plane has been flying for many more hours. Of course, all this is very shocking, confusing, bewildering, and the media are running short of words to describe. You may remember it has actually been the best story for CNN ever. I think they doubled their ratings over that story. And I've heard many people since telling me that at the time they were addicted to CNN. And if they were talking about something else, they were upset. People, I don't know, I think it's mystery that creates this attraction. But I mean, that happened at that time. Okay, so 8th of March, 15th of March, this press conference. And then 24th of March, the very tragic moment when it is announced, again by the Prime Minister Najib Razak, that the plane, and he says beyond reasonable doubt, thanks to the information provided by the UK satellite communication company called Inmarsat, and thanks to the analysis of the UK Bureau of Accident, the equivalent of the NTSB in America, but he names the English one, beyond reasonable doubt, it is in the southern Indian Ocean. Basically saying that he also say, he doesn't say that the plane crashed, he doesn't say that everyone is dead, but he basically says that the plane ended there and there is no chances of survival for anyone. And many of the families at that time, you may remember, they have received the information by text, by SMS. So that was very shocking. Anyway, at that time, it's a horrible news, of course, for the families because they are meant to believe that it is the end. The only good news in a way, which seems like a good news at the time, is that Australia takes over. And the Americans, I mean, some Americans make comments that now the real pros, the serious people are taking over. Meaning, I mean, dismissing Malaysia very clearly about all this confusion that has been going on for the last 2 weeks. But be reassured, now that we've got the Australian, it's going to be a well-run business. Actually, the search in Australia, I think, has many, many issues. I dedicate a chapter to it. It's seriously lacking credibility. So I don't think at all that Australia did a better job than Malaysia as far as contributing to the investigation. Actually, talking about Australia, because I won't tell you, it's a story in itself to look at the Australia search, and it's a very interesting and funny one in a way. You may remember all these little pings, you know, that we were hearing, and it makes no sense either. But I can't go into this now. But just one thing that is interesting to note is that Australia has no duty whatsoever to do this search. And it's not so much in Australia tradition to spend millions of dollars to look for different, to do this kind of thing, basically. I remember when I was based in Australia, when there were French sailors doing solo races, and often they would go too far south because that's where they go faster and all that. And when one would be in trouble, there was always a big issue that we were spending a lot of money to go and rescue this solo sailor. Now it's not, in this case, it's not the cost of a few plane trip going there. It's been tens of millions. And no one asked Australia to do it. The Prime Minister wrongly said it's in our waters, so we should do it. It's not in their waters. It's international waters. And it's very strange, if you ask me, what Australia and why Australia took the lead in this search. It would have seemed much more normal that Malaysia or China, because China had 2/3 of the passengers, took the lead. But anyway, that's just a side note. Now, maybe I will touch on some of the theories that you've mentioned, because since nothing credible and tangible was coming out of the search, nature hates emptiness, right? So you have to fill the emptiness and the lack of acceptable explanation with other explanation. And you may have heard the story of Diego Garcia, the military base that the US have in the northern part of the Indian Ocean. Supposedly the plane would have had tried to crash there, and either was the people were kidnapped or it was actually shot just before. Just actually, as early as yesterday, someone called me and told me that he was convinced that the plane had been shot 300 nautical miles from Diego Garcia, and he actually organized a model plane to go and check with cameras and etc. And because their plane, their model plane, had been shot exactly at that place, he's convinced that this is where we should look for the other plane. So the Diego Garcia story is still going on and is still agitating a lot of people. I looked into Diego Garcia. I think it's a fascinating story in itself. And again, it's a very long story. The island itself has been, the people have been taken away. It is a UK island, but it is leased by the American, and at the moment, it's a central island for the American defense. Anyway, there is no proof whatsoever of any connection between this flight and Diego Garcia. So for that reason alone, in my view, it doesn't stand. And of course, the fact that some people had seen a plane flying low in the Maldives was vaguely connecting it to Diego Garcia because it's 1,000 kilometers south of it. So they were thinking maybe it was above Maldives first, and then it goes to Diego Garcia. But again, that makes no sense because, okay, we have Malaysia here, China, and then you have Maldives and Diego Garcia is there. Why would the plane go above Maldives, fly low? And as you know, when you fly low, you can't fly fast, and you can't stay long as a plane low. Anyway, this whole thing, I really looked into it because so many people were paying attention to it, but I could not find any beginning of truth in it. Another one which was fascinating was the Freescale one. I don't know if you remember that one. I think it's what you mentioned is a mix of Freescale and Diego Garcia in a way. The plane was carrying 20 people working for the same company called Freescale, which is a very important and strategic company in America. It does all kinds of the most advanced defense system. For example, how a missile can reach its target. I mean, really the top end of strategy and defense. And you had 20 people belonging to that company in the plane. So, of course, it raises questions. You wonder, why are these people there? And one of the theories that went wild on the internet was that 4 among these 20 were actually owners of a very sensitive and important pattern. The 5th owner, the last 20%, let's say, was Freescale. And this pattern was so precious and important that the American, in this instance, because Freescale is American, would have decided that it was not possible to let it be shared by all these people. And because it's complicated to kill 4 people in one go, You know, you can kill one, he has a car accident, the next one gets a stone, and then the third one. But 4 together in a short period of time is complicated. They would have crashed that plane. And I mean, that's the scenario I call the James Bond scenario. And anyway, at the beginning, I thought it's fascinating. So I did call Freescale. I did ask them to confirm who were the people on the plane and more specifically what kind of qualification and role they had in the company to see if there could be these people. But then I checked the pattern that was supposed to be the one that they were that the plane would have been crashed for, basically, so that Freescale would stay the 100% owner. And the pattern is 30 pages. It looks very technical, but I asked someone who is in this field to look at it. And it's nothing. I mean, it is a pattern that allows the number of microchips that you put on a wafer to be optimized. Okay, you don't crash a plane for that, and you don't go to war with China for that. So the story was well tried, but it held no water whatsoever. So another lead to be closed. Freescale, the James Bond scenario cannot is not a good one. Then you may have heard as well that there were tons of fresh mangosteen in this plane, and that's a problem because it was not the right season. And you can find a little bit of fresh mangosteen in March if they come from Indonesia or something. But in this instance, it was 4.5 tons. So that's almost half of the whole cargo shipment would be mangosteens. So people questioned that for the obvious reason. I checked further. I found that China officially does not import mangosteens from Malaysia. They only import durian. Then I found that the guy who signed the billway is not a fruit exporter. Then there is actually no mangosteen being produced in Johor. I mean, the list goes on like that, to prove that there is a real issue with these tons of mangosteen. But the story becomes even more tricky when you check the cargo manifest of the 10 or even the 20 next MH370. They changed the name of the flight a bit later, of course, by respect for the people on board. But basically, all the flights doing Kuala Lumpur to Beijing the following weeks, they were also carrying fresh mangosteens. So you think, okay, it makes no sense for the 8th of March, but it can't be the reason why the plane crashed, because all these other MH370 are also carrying fresh mangosteens. So what I think it's a clear indication that there is some kind of trafficking going on under the cover of fresh mangosteen, but it's a repeated scheme. And actually, by chance, I was at a conference at the Hong Kong University a few months later about the ivory traffic and the wild animals. And they show a slide with where all these things go transit. And the largest transit place of the African forbidden illicit trade going to China was actually Kuala Lumpur. So I thought, okay, maybe fresh mangosteen means ivory, basically. You know, one day it's ivory, the next day it's rhino horn or something. But once again, it's an interesting lead. And yes, there is a problem with these mangosteens, but it's not the reason, it doesn't seem to be the reason why MH may have, crashed. And you would have heard other stories. I can give you details later. There was the story of a twin plane to 9M MRO, which was found in a hangar in Israel. But really, I thought that no alternative theory was satisfying. So at that stage of my investigation, I thought, okay, let's give a second chance or re-examine the official narrative. And because with time, you become more familiar and things settles and you know what state of the story, you have the official documents, etc. So I look at it and I cut it in 3 pieces. The official narrative is, number 1, as we said, deliberate act, which means someone in charge turns off the hacker system, turns off the transponder, turns left towards the west, and fly above Malaysia, between Malaysia and Thailand. Once in Malacca Strait, they go north, trying to avoid Indonesia airspace. And the third part of the official narrative is when Inmarsat, the UK satellite communication company that I was mentioning before, takes over. So basically, none of these 3 parts hold. Number 1, deliberate act. When the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Najib Razak, said so, of course it sounds credible. If he says that there has been a deliberate act, it means he knows. But then I tried to confirm with pilots and with experts, just asking them, by the way, how do we know that the hacker system has been turned off? Because I don't know if you remember, but when this was announced, it created a lot of excitement in a way, because people were thinking, this has never been done before. The guy must be so smart. He's a real exceptional pilot. And then we heard these people saying, you don't even learn that in schools, in flying schools, because it makes no sense. You never, ever want to turn off your hacker system. It should not be even possible. Anyway, so people started fantasizing a lot on the base of this statement by the Prime Minister. Yet, when I researched that, how do we know that there was this deliberate act? The answer is, we do not know. We do not know. There is no way to know that the hacker system was ever turned off. What we know is that the bulletin at 1:07 was sent. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining what is hackers, because I'm guessing that if you're here, you may have read a bit. But it is this automatic emission that sends technical data about the plane. And according to the contract that the company takes, the airline takes with Inmarsat, it can be sent every 10 minutes, every hour, every half hour. In the case of Malaysia Airlines, it was half hour. I've just heard that Air France now is every 4 minutes. And of course, it's a good way to know how the engines are doing and so on. And sometimes the pilots tell you that they get feedback from the tower, the control, telling them you have a problem with this. They didn't even notice, but because the feedback goes to Earth, that's how it works. So anyway, deliberate act, we actually do not know. There is no way to know that it's been turned off. That's very problematic, because that's the base of the official narrative. Okay, the next aspect is the fact that the plane flew over Malaysia, Thailand, and in the Malacca Strait. Of course, you may remember that initially we were told that the countries, the neighboring countries do not share radars for strategic reasons and so on and so forth. Yet, I don't think that holds very much when you have 239 lives at stake. And we all thought that sooner or later we would see radar images of this plane crossing above Malaysia and then in the Malacca Strait. Now, more than 2 years after, there has not been a single raw image of radar data shared with the public. And to my understanding, even inside the investigation from the Australian who've asked Malaysia, and from the French, which is also leading, France is also leading an investigation. They've also not received any radar images. Now you can wonder at one point if it is because they are so precious, or is it because they just do not exist? And when you see that we have no satellite image, no radar data, no information from any ship in the region, you may start to think that the simpler explanation to that is just that this plane was never there. If they don't have images, maybe it's because they don't. If you don't see the plane, you can say that you don't have images. And actually, there was something interesting. You may, at the time, it was, we were told that the Malaysian military were actually supposedly sleeping in front of their radars, and that made everyone laugh. And even though they have very good radars, Malaysia is well-equipped military. They have Marconi radars, British ones, and then they have French radars. So there is no issue. And even if the people are sleeping, the radars still do their job. They don't sleep. Yet there was a lot of sarcasm about this. What I was amazed to discover, though, is that according to the official narrative, we are told that this plane flew over Penang Island before it goes up north into Malacca Strait. You would be surprised to know that on Penang Island, there is a military base called Butterworth Base. Butterworth Base hosts the head office of the 5-Power Defense Agreement, which is an agreement between UK, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Malaysia. The boss, the chief of this, is an Australian Air Vice Marshal. And now their job is to make sure that their space, their common space, is not encroached. So in theory, if Australian airspace thousands of miles away from there is encroached, they would scramble planes. This is where it's happening. It's the command there. But yet, you have a rogue B777 flying right above their roof, supposedly, and nothing happens? That's another problem, right? So either they are completely useless, much more so than the Malaysians, or, again, the plane never flew above their roof. Anyway, that's to tell you about the second part of the official narrative, that we basically relies on nothing. And then the third, of course, is the Inmarsat. Inmarsat, so the whole idea that the plane is now somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean is based on the information provided by the UK satellite communication Inmarsat. It's a very tiny piece of evidence. The entirety of the data has not been provided, very strangely. Is there any good reason to not provide the whole data? Because you have a community, they are called the Independent Group, a community of a few dozens of super bright people, mathematicians, astrophysicists, etc., who are working very hard trying to solve this enigma. And even them, they have not been given the entire set of data. And then you look at who is in Inmarsat and what could be their interest in coming up with that. It's not their job to trace planes, and it's actually a company which is highly strategic as well. I was surprised to find that within 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks actually, just the day after it was said that the plane was in the southern Indian Ocean, a strategic advisor to the President Barack Obama was appointed to the board of Inmarsat. And I was also surprised to find that when Xi Jinping, the Chinese, well, no need to tell you that, went to UK in London, he visited only one company during his stay in London. This is Inmarsat. And when you look at Inmarsat and they say who we are, Inmarsat government, actually, it's the biggest branch of Inmarsat. They help governments, but they say precisely dedicated to serve US government. So it is a very strategic company, and they are the one who served the truth that we are basically requested to believe. So, and of course, I had some information from people, former employees of Inmarsat, who told me, a man, he said, you know, even when I left the company, and that was several years ago, we already knew at any moment where our planes are. So he didn't understand at all this big business of passive handshake, etc. So there is a lot of questioning and doubts that should be asked about these three parts of the official narrative. Now, the trouble for the investigators, I think, is that it seems to me that for them as well, they're struggling to come up with some kind of narrative that will make this not credible story all together. And everything at this stage, from my information, seems to indicate that they will try to accuse the captain. So that's also something very key, whether the captain, Captain Ahmed Zahari Shah, could have been the guilty one. And I looked at it, and to cut a long story short, I came out of my investigation, and the people I met, his family, his friends, what he did, what did and people didn't know about him. I came out with almost the conviction, although I know that you can never be 100% sure, that he was a very decent man, a very good man, an excellent pilot, and there is, in my view, no way that he would have had any of these dark plans to destroy his plane and kill all the passengers, even though he was at the center of a real smear campaign from the very beginning. But I looked at all what had been said about him, and nothing is true either. So it's a bit problematic, because you also see some intentions in the way the okay, I'm being told that it's actually it's almost finished. I think now basically the pilot, I'm excluding him from any guilt. Remaining problems at this stage, many, including the debris, or rather the lack of it, but I'm sure you will have a question about that. So the plane has not been found, despite the greatest search in the history of humankind, if you believe the Australian Prime Minister. And I'm sorry to say that according to what I understand, the plane will never be found where they're looking for it. That's something I'm pretty sure of. And it is obviously very embarrassing and unpleasant to hear for Australia. I could just comment on one or two questions that I find that this story and this investigation raise. One important question is the trust that we, the media, and also the public place in official statements, because you will have seen a lot of lies in that story, a lot of things being said one style and then changing, and that's very problematic, because the media, we need to believe when we receive an official statement, when a prime minister says something, We need to trust that. If we can't, and in this story we are discovering that we should not have, then it's a big problem for the next story. If he lied this time, how can we know that it will be true next time? And then, of course, the other problem, I think, is about the media, because, and I'm part of it, obviously. I don't think we did a good job in that story. It is very complicated. It is very time-consuming to explore it. But we're going along too fast with what we are served, and I guess it shouldn't be like that. So I'm sure. I hope I've not been too long. This is an outline, and I'm very curious to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Because Florence has just come back from Malaysia, yes? And, well, I came back from Malaysia last week. I stayed there for a few days. I asked local native Malaysian people, just trying to find out what they believed in. And at least 3 or 4 native Malaysian, Malay, not Chinese, they came back to me with one theory. It was done by the captain, because he had attended the campaign for the campaign conference by Anwar, and he was a supporter of Anwar, and he was so angry that Anwar was put in prison again for the 2nd time by the Prime Minister Najib. So as a revenge, he did that. So, I mean, this is, again, it sounds, well, not incredible, but not credible to me. Right?
Well, it would have been, if it was the captain, it was the only way you could reconcile this very strange route of the plane, and that's why it was so important to find that it was or it was not. And I'm really sorry to hear that you got that impression, because it shows that it's probably what will happen. It confirms that this is going to be the official report. I mean, likely to be.
Because what mystified me was that these native Malaysian people told me this same government-sponsored theory, that he was a traitor. So why was the captain vilified in such a political way? Mm-hmm. It shows that the Malaysian government must have known at least a substantial part of the truth. Yeah. And they wanted to shift the blame to a political enemy.
Yeah, I can add an anecdote to that, because I got access to the report, the confidential report that some families paid. They hired a private investigator in Singapore, and they never shared the content of this report, which is not right, because it was crowdfunded, so they should have put it to the public. But I got to see it. And in it, there was one news which I could have done first front page with it, because it said that the pilot had requested 2 extra hours of fuel. If the pilot had requested 2 extra hours of fuel, he was guilty. He was the culprit. I asked many pilots, there is no way you do that. Not on a Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. And if you do that, you seem very odd, unless there is massive weather issues, etc. And then I told the families who paid for this investigation, you know that this is not true, because you have the amount of fuel by Malaysia Airlines, 49.1 tons, and you have the amount of fuel by the first ACARS bulletin, what we were discussing before, 49.2 tons, so basically they are consistent. 49 tons is exactly, I've asked several B777 pilots, the amount that a good pilot would take to go Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. So this was a lie, but it is inside the report made by the private investigator to the family. So this is already one example that there is a real effort to dismiss him, right?
There was a concerted campaign to lead the public into believing that the captain was the culprit, right?
If it seems it's no one else.
Was sponsored by at least one government, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's so intriguing. You know, so logically, the government must have been withholding something, right? Logically.
Yeah, yeah, but choosing the captain as the culprit is always the favorite option of the investigators. In the book, I looked at many other crashes, and even some we think is a pilot suicide, like you may remember Silk Air.
Yes.
You remember Silk Air?
Depression.
It was mainly said as a pilot suicide. When you look at it closely, it's actually it looks like a technical issue.
Oh, the Swiss Air from Brazil.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Oh, the different one.
No, I'm talking about Silk Air in
not
Indonesia.
Not the German Air. No, I see.
No, German Wings. Yeah,
yeah.
That one is.
Okay.
Yeah, seems more clear cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, please. You are from Malaysia. Yes.
I would like to make some clarify from Mr. Tsao about the suspicion about the pilot is the guy behind all this conspiracy, because about the Anwar Ibrahim trial, actually it's not final, because it still can be appealed, it still can be waiting for the high court sentence. So since it's not the final sentiment, so I think the pilot won't be so depressed about this about the action to what called the take revenge against the government, okay? And then otherwise, he will be, if he really would like to do, then he will start to communicate to the government, say that bargaining, you have to free Anwar Ibrahim, otherwise I will crash the plane. Yep. Otherwise, it cannot, it have be a motive behind. But I would like to make up one of my suspicions about this issue is after 911, the plane crashed the Twin Tower. I think U.S. government certainly will request the plane maker or some system to monitor the whole world air traffic, okay? This is makes sense to make sure they will not second 911, okay? If the case like that, I think U.S. government should have some data, or they will instruct the manufacturer to install some of the equipment so that they can monitor 24/7 about the air traffic. So if the case like that, how come, or how about your investigation about the manufacturer, whether they have some kind of technical instrument inside that they do not want to leak it up, so that some of the potential plane buyer will think that, hey, if FBI can monitor our plane 24/7, I sure not buying your Boeing. Okay, this is some of my thinking. I don't know whether it's logic or not.
I think, as I said, that there is no real issue with planes disappearing, because planes do not disappear. And you ask anyone, they say that plane is meant to be seen. They do everything to be seen. They have many ways of being seen and of communicating. So when I see headlines saying that since MH370 we are going to implement new systems or whatever, I think that this is drawing the wrong conclusion from a story, basically. Because in my view, that's not the problem we have with MH370. It's not that it disappeared. Something catastrophic happens, which is being hidden, which is very different. Basically, it was disappeared. It was an active of some kind. So I wouldn't worry too much about what needs to be done. I'm surprised no one is asking about all these debris. Shall I comment on the debris? Okay. Shortly, the big debris in France, the flaperon found in July last year, It seemed initially that this was the missing debris, right? Because the biggest problem the story had was that we had no debris. Now, finally, we have a debris. So it looks like good news. And maybe it will help close the file. The problem is the flaperon is not that perfect in terms of credibility as whether or not it really belongs to MH370. I'm not yet 100% it does. I'm not 100% it doesn't either, but I have highlighted and I'm dedicating a whole chapter of my book on the flaperon because it has one major problem. It has lost its identification plate. That's something that it's riveted, right? How do you lose a riveted plate? You don't, even with 16 months in the water. And it could be glued, but in some cases it may be glued. But again, with glue that is supposed to sustain changes of altitude, temperature, pressure, etc. So again, 16 months in the ocean doesn't take it off. So that's the major problem it has. The next problem it has, it was covered with barnacles, right? And on all sides. So that, if you ask biologists, and I've asked biologists from America, Japan, and I've had a look at the official French report, if you have these barnacles all around, it means the thing was under the water or being sprayed very regularly. All part of the surface. Now, the floating study say that it floated with a certain angle. Basically, there is a major inconsistency again between the way this thing is supposed to have floated and the way it is covered by barnacles. And actually, talking about debris, there is an interesting comment by the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, ex-Prime Minister, when after 50 days of search, nothing was found on the surface. He said, well, we have to come to terms with this, right? It's 52 days now. All these debris will be waterlogged. They will have sunk. We can't expect anything else. We will do the subwater search. There will be no more debris. The Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, said that. Yet when 520 days later, we find a flaperon 6,000 kilometers away from the crash point, expected crash point, he's the first one to jump on it and say that this makes perfect sense. That's the problem with the story. The same people keep saying different things. 50 days they say cannot float anymore, it's finished. 500 days, oh yes, that's right, it's normal. It confirms what we always said. Well, and now about the more recent debris, the one you may remember is the one in Mozambique, which was discovered just a few days before the second anniversary. Again, it contributes to possibly closing the file. When you look at who found it and how, you may wonder how genuine this is. But anyway, the person who found it is an American guy called Alan Blaine Gibson. He's passionate about this story. The previous story of his passion, he was looking for the lost Ark of the Covenant. And before that, he was trying to solve the end of the Maya civilization. So he loves big mysteries, right? He has an unlimited budget, apparently. He travels everywhere. Himalaya, Reunion, Maldives, Madagascar, Malaysia, non-stop. Before he went to Mozambique, he was in Australia. He met there the Vice Prime Minister, Warren Truss. And I was surprised because, like me, correspondent for Le Monde, if I go to Australia, it's not that easy to meet the Vice Prime Minister. So a blogger who is passionate about MH370 gets to meet Warren Truss. Okay. And he also meets a professor of the Western Australia University. And this man tells him, you know, with all my research, I would suggest you go and check Mozambique. So Because he has a lot, at least he has enough money to travel endlessly, and he has no job and no family. He goes to Mozambique. And one day he decides that will be my day to search for MH370. That's him, his story told on the BBC. I tried to talk to him, but he doesn't want to talk to me because of what I'm saying now, basically, because of my way of explaining the story. And he rents a little boat, 2 engines, and he goes to this sandbank, having asked people, where do things end up here? Old fishing nets and things like that. And people say, oh, we know a place, we'll take you there. They go there, they have only 2 hours because the tide is coming in or something like that. So anyway, they don't need 2 hours. After 5 minutes, on this sandbank, they find the famous piece, the so-called second debris of MH370. Now, how lucky is that? Very, 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 very lucky, right?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds more miraculous
than
Moses having been told by God how to find the land of honey and milk.
Yeah, and it gets even more miraculous because on his next trip in Madagascar, he finds 5 pieces. And that's when a TV crew is there. Yes, but I know we're laughing, but the thing is that this is headlines in good media. We're not questioning this, right? So that's when it's...
So you tried to call him and he refused to answer. He didn't want to talk to you.
Yeah, because, yes, I tried to call him. I said, we can share notes. I think that these debris are interesting and they should be looked at. Number one, they have not been confirmed, 100%. They are all highly likely or almost certain. That's the repetitive qualification. Now, if you take a piece of plastic from Boeing, because there were pieces from inside, pieces from outside, they grind it, they put some chemicals in it, they will get the exact recipe of this piece of plastic, and they will be able to say if yes or no, this is a piece from Boeing, right? The fact that they satisfy themselves with almost certain or highly likely, to me, means no. Because I think that if they were certain, they would say we are certain. And they don't get there. And actually, recently, when I was exchanging text with Blaine, because he doesn't want to talk to me, but sometimes he replies to my question about the last 3 debris that he found in Madagascar, and he told me not 3, 5. I said, oh, even better. He said that the authorities had not even picked them up, and he was shocked by that. And in a way, what it says to me is that the authorities themselves don't really believe in these debris. But if the media are happy to go along with the song and say that this is part of MH370 being found, why not? Yeah, so, yeah.
If the debris on the plane are not in the Southern Ocean, Indian Ocean, where might have disappeared the plane on his line to the north near Vietnam?
My conclusion at the end of where I got with the French version of the book, and I'm continuing and going further, is back to square one. As I said, since we know nothing, since I dismiss 100% basically of the official narrative, it's back to square one, where we last knew the plane was, at basically 1:30 something. This is in the South China Sea. And that's where I think search should take place or start from, yeah. And there have been lots of debris, but we don't know much about them there. When it's happening there, it's very quickly dismissed, actually.
But it was certain, it was made certain that it changed direction. Flying.
Yeah,
west.
that's what we all know. But what I'm challenging in my book is that I'm suddenly revisiting it and saying, I'm sorry, we have no reason to believe it. It is a dictation. Yes. It is what we are told to believe. And I think we shouldn't.
So back to square one then. Yes. Any other questions?
I think I have just two questions about like your talk, like about, do you believe that initially the government or the governments they know the truth about the planes, but they are just distracting the public, like the place or where the planes is down or other things else? And the second question is that, do you think that the debris or the evidence found after several years, like the debris is found after several years, they are the artifacts evidenced by the government or by someone or some organizations to make the public to believe that this is the truth, or what they want to tell us, this is the truth?
About the debris, basically whether they are planted or not, in the case of the flaperon, which I studied most, I can't, at this stage I can't say yet, but as I said, I'm not sure either that it is MH370. In the case of all these other debris that have been found recently, it's very interesting to know that the place where they have been found is a place, it's, for what I found, the highest density of plane crashes in the world. So it just happens that there have been a lot of big crashes in that part of the world. For example, you have two major, one is a Boeing 767, and it's interesting because some parts of the Boeing 767 are very similar to parts of the Boeing 777, and in the Comoros Island. And they are just north of the Mozambique Channel, which goes between Madagascar and Africa. And it's a southward channel, current, very strong current. You have two major crashes here. It was a long time ago. Nevertheless, plane pieces, and actually we've seen these pieces, they had no biofuel on it, they had no barnacles. They could well have been there for 10 or 15 years, because a plane of Boeing on a beach will stay a plane of Boeing for a long time. And so the easy and the logical explanation to most of these debris, if they are plane debris, is that they are debris from the local crashes. Why go and imagine that what we find here is coming from the other side of the Indian Ocean when you've had all these crashes locally? But because they were explained, of course, the debris are not collected, and because beaches are never cleaned, they stay there. But that's just one easy explanation I'm suggesting. Now, about the government, whether they know or not, it is simply impossible with the technology that we have nowadays, especially the technology that the US have in terms of satellite, surveillance, etc., that they don't know where this plane is. There is not one military to whom I talked who would believe that. So I'm sorry, it sounds whatever, but of course the governments know. Some governments know precisely where this plane is. You know, with satellite, we can see, some satellite can see basically a cigarette butt, right? A Boeing 777 is slightly bigger, right?
Yes, of course. So, yes.
Especially in this strategic region. We're talking either the South China Sea, and we all know everything that is happening there and how strategic it is, or Malacca Straits, where 2/3 of the import-export of China are traveling. Yes. So this is a super monitored area, right? I'm writing in the book, if you want to pick a place to disappear, it's the worst. This is the most surveilled place on the planet. Yes. So not a good idea to disappear there, right?
And the silence of China is particularly interesting because now China is being bullied everywhere. There were more than 200 Chinese passengers on the plane, who were killed by Americans or Malaysian or Anwar supporter, whatever. China would make a big fuss. Yet they have been very, very quiet.
Yeah, and the fact that China has not contributed or barely contributed to the search,
No.
to me, is a bit problematic as well. I mean, it's a clue.
It's strange.
Yeah.
Because China feels that it is being bullied. Right?
Yeah, but I think
you don't bully China by just simply making more than 200 Buddhists, right, disappear. You know, they must demand an answer, right?
Yeah, but the fact that they don't is indeed very interesting to observe.
Have you spoken to families, Chinese families?
Yeah, yes.
In Beijing or whatever, yes.
Yes, the thing is
and
that...
they didn't have a clue. Have they been told by Chinese officials to shut up? Here's a bag of money, you take the money and shut, no?
To some extent, because initially they were allowed actually to protest quite a lot. There were pretty, you may remember, active protests in front of the Malaysian embassy, even in Beijing, which is unusual. But after a while, they have been kind of silenced. There was a support center that was opened, but it was in a most inconvenient place, unattainable by public transport. So people would take rosters, the parents, to go there to make sure it would not close. They were keeping hope, but my impression as well is that the Chinese families are not very organized. They have a WeChat on which for every passenger they are allowed maybe 2 or 3 people on this WeChat, and they exchange a lot of information, but they don't know much, unfortunately. And I must say about the families that their suffering is endless and is getting worse every day. The difference of a normal mourning or a normal loss, where time improves you, allows you to get on with life. In this case, I've seen these people, and unfortunately, most of them are getting worse, because it's a wound that aggravates.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's also for them that the truth must come out, and I think that the public opinion must not accept this official narrative. No. As I say, we should stop with the incredible and we should switch to the not credible.
But China has not conducted any investigation officially.
No, it's very strange.
That's very strange.
Yeah, French is doing one, whereas there were 4 passengers. In China, there were 154, I think, out of the 239, and they're not doing their. Maybe they are, but we don't know about it.
Because they could kidnap a publisher in Bangkok, in Thailand, and then kidnap another one in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You are telling me, this plane that big, and they don't give a damn where it is, where it is now, or they couldn't find it. No, I don't believe it. Do you? No. All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for your thorough and meticulously scientific and logical research on such a big mystery since 1963, the assassination of JFK. I'm sure it will remain being discussed and talked about in the coming years. And of course, we hope that the truth will come out so that those who perish on the plane, would be, their families would put their mind at ease. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I hope it won't take 50 years.